Hi, I'm Johnny, ultimatepapermache.com, and I don't have a new project for you today, but I have some ideas for a paper mache project that I hope you can give me some feedback on. What I would really like to do someday is to make a whole family of goblins, and I want them to be running around in front of my garden fence, helping each other steal my pumpkins and my squash. Now, in my mind, they are stealing pumpkins because it's supposed to be a Halloween project, but I didn't actually grow any pumpkins in my garden this year. What I did grow was a whole lot of squash, and that's why I've actually had a whole bunch of time to be thinking about goblins in the last couple of weeks. One of my favorite garden books is by a lady named Carol Depp. She's from Oregon, and she wrote The Resilient Gardener. And in it, she recommends that we plant a lot of squash if we're in uncertain times, which is kind of what it's feeling like right now. And the reason for that is that you can grow an awful lot of food in a fairly small amount of space, and it doesn't take a lot of time. So I took her advice. The chickens really help. They make really good fertilizer, and I planted a few too many seeds. But unfortunately, it's not all keeping very well. So I'm having to pressure can. I'm saying probably about 200 pounds, and I've got about 2/3 of it done so far. But there's still some left, so I'm not going to have another real project for a while. But it has given me time to kind of stand around in the kitchen while the pressure canner is doing its thing, and I've been on my little Kindle device, and I just happened to notice that there was a Kindle book that I got years ago from Dan Reeder. It's one of his books about making dragons with cloth mache. Even though I haven't made any dragons using his method, I did actually, way back in 2009, I made this snow leopard and these two, I'm calling them angel cats, using kind of his method. He makes balls of crumpled paper and he hooks them together in certain ways. He explains it really well in all of his books. But instead of doing it kind of freehand like he does, you can get really creative with dragons. It doesn't matter how long their legs are or how they're bent or, they're fantasy, and so you can really play with them. But I wanted my cats to look like cats. And so I drew out the shapes on a big piece of cardboard so I can get all the proportions right. And then I created my balls like he does on top of it so that I could get everything pretty much in order and get all the shapes right. And it worked really well. I took photographs of the finished pieces and put them on my blog, but that was, like I said, a really long time ago. I still didn't have a video camera. I didn't do any kind of tutorial showing how it was done. There's no pattern at all for those. So if you're wondering, no, sorry. I wasn't into the pattern thing yet. But because I had drawn the shape out on cardboard first before I put all those pieces together, it kind of segued into the idea of putting a piece of cardboard on the inside of a sculpture, which is how this guy was made. And that was pretty much the basis for my book, Make Animal Sculptures with Paper Mache Clay. So even though I'm not using Dan's methods at all for making these guys, and I haven't used it since 2009, since I made those cats, he was kind of, in a way, the inspiration for me to make my own book and to create my own ideas of how to put sculptures together. The one thing that I do remember from making those cats is that his way of putting the pieces together after they're all made, you can then move those legs around and bend them and do anything you want to and get a really dynamic sculpture when it's all done. They can be doing anything as long as it's reasonable. And that's a little bit difficult when you're putting just a flat cardboard piece on the inside. And that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking that my figure sculptures will work really well using his methods. I will still make at least a rough drawing so that I'll get the proportions the way I want them. And I'm going to need my little guys to be a certain height. So I'm going to have to do that kind of in advance rather than just doing it on the fly. But I will use his internal structure. If you have one of his books, you already know how that works. And if you would like to learn how he does, like I said, still have some of his books available online. It's I love his teaching style. He's really good at it. He's humorous. He's got a real personality in his books, and he is a really good teacher, so I highly recommend any of his books if you can find one. But it isn't just his idea for creating the inner sculpture that I think would be really helpful, but it's the fact that he once made a dragon and covered it with his cloth mache. That's what he does with all of his dragons. He uses old sheets and dips them in glue, but this one dragon, he dipped them, instead of using Elmer's glue, he used wood glue, and he covered it. Then he put that dragon out in a tree right outside of his house in Seattle. And when he wrote an article about it, he said that it had been up there for several years and there was nothing had happened to it. Rain all the time. And it hadn't hurt it at all. I'm going to try to find that article, and I'll put a link to it down below so that you can see it. I think he even gives us a photo of that particular dragon. And that was quite a long time ago, so I don't know how well it's holding up now. But that idea of using the cloth dipped in wood glue, I think he even used tight bond wood glue like we do for some of our theater masks. It has recently kind of become popular, something really, really similar for people making their camper shells and even like trailers that you pull behind a car. They're made with thin insulation board, the foam stuff that you get at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're covering it with basically cloth mache, but with the wood glue instead. And they're using canvas, big canvas sheets, I'm sure. So it'd be a lot messier. They're large pieces of fabric instead of just little strips. And they're using the wood glue and the canvas to cover these camper shells, and they're calling it poor man's fiberglass. And it's almost exactly the same, except for bigger pieces, as Dan Reeder's cloth mache that he used that one time with wood glue. And so that's why I'm thinking that both the kind of dynamic inner sculptures that he makes without a pattern on the inside and his cloth mache using wood glue would really work for the project that I'm thinking about. I know a whole lot of people have made cloth mache dragons because Dan has been putting out his books and his YouTube videos for years, longer than I've been doing it myself. So I know a lot of people have done it, and I'm really hoping that you have some ideas for me. The first thing that I'm worried about, which sounds kind of silly, but I'm going to go down to the thrift store and find the oldest sheet I can find and tear it up into strips. And you have to tear it up into fairly thin strips because you can't have big pieces of cloth on there. It's going to get all wrinkled. But I don't know how to make them so skinny exactly. I mean, there's got to be something to make it easier, maybe. And are all the little threads going to break and go all over the house? I mean, that's not that big of a deal. I got dog hair all over the house already, but if there's a way to avoid it, that would be nice. The other thing that I'm a little concerned about, maybe you have some ideas for me, is that Dan's dragons are usually either on the wall, just the head, like these guys, or they're hung from the ceiling, so they don't, they don't have to stand up on their own 2 feet, like my goblins have to. His dragon that he left outside, the one that was made out of wood glue, it's actually attached to a tree. My goblins are going to be on just 2 feet. If they're running, they'd only be on 1 foot at a time, right? They're going to be outside in Minnesota. They'll only be out for a month or two because, it's just for Halloween. I've never gotten excited about a Halloween project this early before in my whole entire life. But this time, for some reason, I just got really into it. But I don't want my little guys to blow into the next county, which they might because the wind blows. I don't want them to fall over if a squirrel climbs them or something. And I don't know how to, I just don't know how to get them to, I don't know how to do it. Let me say it that way. And I really hope that you'll give me some ideas to think about while I'm standing in the kitchen finishing up my squash project. But when I get done in a couple of weeks, I do want to get started on that project. I think between now and Halloween, that gives me plenty of time to figure it out. If you have any ideas for me, please let me know. Now, I keep talking about all this squash, and if you happen to still be watching this, and if you happen to have some home canned squash down in your basement like I do. I did find a couple of really good recipes for using home canned butternut. One of them is a crustless pumpkin pie. It really is good and it's really easy, so I'll put a link to that down below. And I found a really good recipe for black bean and butternut squash chili. Really good. I think I could eat that every day, so I'll put a link to that down below too, just in case you're interested. Now I got to get back to the kitchen, finish up that project, but in the meantime, you go make something and come visit me, ultimatepapermache.com. I'll see you there.